Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of ayeQ Answers. This episode is revenue engineering versus revenue motion. And if for the folks that are listening that know me, I used to call RevOps revenue engineering 20 years ago. So I'm an engineer who landed in the growth function of a B2B company. So when my guest today and I started chatting, it was complete alignment. So I'm super excited to have Katarina Lujic on the call today. So welcome, Katarina.
Thanks so much, Dana. That's awesome to know that you originated revenue engineering, it
Oh,
sounds like.
I would love to take credit of having coined that for everyone, but
We're giving it
but
to you.
I love that concept. So uh, so I want to talk about what we're tackling today. So we're tackling a challenge that every B2B SaaS company faces. So here's a scenario. Our pipeline looks healthy. The team is busy. Marketing is generating leads. Sales is having conversations. Customer success is working hard to retain customers. And yet revenue feels unpredictable. And I love this. I was actually talking with somebody yesterday and I was like, yeah, here's the scenario. Um, Marketing says they're generating leads. Sales is saying pipeline's healthy. Success says things are good. Finance says things are at risk. And then the CEO is getting ready for the board meeting. He says, "Okay, so how do I want to tell the board the health of our businesses?" And then it's
Mhm.
crickets, right?
Yep.
Because nobody knows how all of these things relate to each
Mhm.
other.
Right.
So, and this relates so much to what we were talking about, Katarina, is, when growth slows or targets are missed, many organizations respond by working harder, right? By
Right.
increasing activity, more campaigns, more outreach, more meetings, more tools. But what I love about what your approach is, it's like, hey, guys, maybe the problem isn't activity at all, right? What if the challenge is understanding, where in our process is actually limiting growth? And
Mhm.
so Katarina is the founder of GTM Lab and creator of the Scale to 10 Million Sprint. So Katarina works with B2B SaaS founders to diagnose the bottlenecks hiding inside their go-to-market systems, identifying the revenue levers that will have the biggest impact on growth, and create focused execution plans that drive measurable results. And so complete alignment with what our philosophy here is at ayeQ. So all right, so let's go ahead and get started. And Katarina, fill us in on a little bit of your background so our listeners understand, where did the thinking come from? How did you develop the thinking around how to unstick B2B companies in their growth efforts?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. Thanks for that. I feel really fortunate to be where I'm at today, to be totally honest. When I'm not honing in on like a perfect chai tea latte or hanging out with my dogs or backpacking, I'm working directly with these B2B SaaS founders, almost always right around 1, 2, 3 million, and their goal is 10. And I'm helping them achieve that 10 million goal without missing another quarter of revenue. And like I said, I feel so fortunate to be here because I'm actually a first generation immigrant from former Yugoslavia. We came over here in 98, and the Silicon Valley tech startup scene definitely had that like glitter and gold appeal to me from a pretty young age. I was a BDR right out of college. For this, I started a company called Gigya. This was the first satellite office outside of San Fran, and it definitely had that exciting pace that I just immediately resonated with.
Mhm.
And I was hooked. I went from Gigya, which was acquired by SAP, to Zenefits, which was where Parker Conrad was the leader. And he was ousted shortly afterwards and started rippling. And that just seeing that entire process happen. And
Mhm.
I was like 19 or 20 at this age. I remember thinking like, oh, this is different. Because before that, I was a teller at a bank. I worked in like corporate retail, so everything is really your next step is right in front of you. You know what you're going to do. Um,
Hmm.
and this was really exciting to me because one, you didn't know what was going to happen, but two, you can actually make an impact on what's going to happen. It really felt like even at a young age, I could start making a difference in these businesses. So I
Hmm.
immediately resonated with that. And I got my master's abroad. And when I came back, I wanted to now apply this for business leaders in a different way, where I feel very strongly that business ownership is the way that we can change the world.
Yeah.
So my deeper why now is I want to help people succeed whose missions I really, really value and care about. Because I feel like success in business is what will help us not only get success in life, but also shape the world to be how we want it to be. This is really where I feel like I can affect change. And when I went back to tech startups after my master's, that's where I started going into customer success and marketing and product. And I just kind of kept noticing that anytime I ran into a problem, the solution was like right across the aisle, like right
Hmm.
over there. I just needed to talk to my counterpart in CS or my counterpart in marketing or get everyone in the room together and just figure out how to tackle this problem using the least amount of resources. Because that's really what I notice is that these problems are all so intricately involved across departments. And I really have a skill set to zoom out and see the forest through the trees. Um,
Hmm.
because every founder I work with has 100 failures that they're dealing with. I'm not going to
Hmm.
lie and tell them that these aren't real problems. They are surrounded by problems. But the key is
Hmm.
there's 95 that they can let burn, there's four that they should monitor. And then there's only one thing that they really need to do today or this week to actually get where they want to go. And that clarity to me is very obvious. So it just made so much sense when the RevOps role came up. To me,
Hmm.
RevOps like blew my mind when I read the description for the first time. It was like, oh, this is what I've been doing. It felt
Hmm.
like I was already doing it. And it just became so clear to me when I read the role for the first time that this is for me. Um, so it's really all driven by this motivation and this goal that I can help those businesses scale. I can help take those VC backed lessons that I got from these huge companies and bring them to smaller customers that don't yet have the big bag of money. They might not even need the big bag of money, but if they want it to, I can help them get that. But it's been really exciting to bring those lessons from multi-million dollar startups in SF here locally to Phoenix and more broadly in the US.
Well, just hearing you speak, I know why you've been so successful in
Mhm.
the companies that you've worked with is, when you say I looked at that RevOps role, well, I even think today the market doesn't define universally doesn't define RevOps the way we think about RevOps,
Mhm.
right? Because RevOps is the whole process of a company generating revenue. It
Mhm.
is not sales ops and marketing ops. It is not the administrator of systems. It is a very, very strategic function. And I think the way you define it, the way you look at it, and your ability to put all of these functions together, that is a brilliant RevOps mind right there. So,
Thank, thank you for saying that. I do think that there is something to viewing it, like you said, as one whole system. Marketing ops, CS ops, sales ops, just by definition, they will always be loyal to the department that they're in. And
mhm,
not through any, I don't mean that as any kind of dig or anything. It's just that they are reporting to sales. So their
mhm,
job is always going to be to either make sales look great or deal with sales' problems
mhm,
in the way that best suits sales, for example. And same with marketing ops and CS ops. Whereas revenue ops, to your point, we are thinking about revenue as a whole.
mhm,
And what's so exciting for me with RevOps is that the solution is always so far away from the symptoms. And
mhm,
that's what really, I think, distinguishes between RevOps and every other department is
mhm,
that they're really looking right within their proximity bias is so much stronger with the other ops, where in RevOps, I know my goal over here, and I have so many different options to get there. Um, and they're almost never close together. It's almost always upstream, way over here. The problem finding is the real juicy stuff in RevOps, and people kind of miss that. We're all about solutions, I think. That's what people see about RevOps. But before the solution is all the problem finding. And that's the stuff that's really exciting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. A good puzzle. A good
Yeah,
puzzle.
absolutely.
So let's do some definitions here.
Please.
Talking about definitions of RevOps. So we talked about two concepts, revenue motion and revenue engineering. So
Mhm.
define those concepts. Tell us how you define those concepts and why they're different.
Yeah, I mean, I think a revenue engineering, I guess, I would say that's the goal. That's what we're trying to get our clients to move towards. Now, whether or not revenue engineering in 1 to 10 million is appropriate yet, that's kind of where I see people moving from revenue motions to revenue engineering. And a revenue motion would be pretty much everything, that your go-to-market team does to create or advance or close revenue. It could be literally outreach to a referral program. That could be a revenue motion. A revenue motion could just be your product-led growth form that you have on your website. That could be one revenue motion. Whereas a revenue system, that's really more about treating revenue as no longer a number that you arrive at. The clients that I work with are treating revenue as the number at the end of the quarter. That's what they get to. That's what they're trying to achieve. It's the outcome. But a revenue system and revenue engineering is when you turn those motions into one cohesive system where there are measurable inputs, there's measurable outputs, there are clear constraints. So you can actually start manipulating pieces of the system in order to manipulate the output, which is revenue, as opposed to consistently thinking of what's a new revenue motion that I can inject into my
Hmm.
plans for this quarter to get to my goal at the end of the quarter. Revenue motions basically are like never ending. They require new work. They keep requiring activity from your employees. Whereas revenue engineering is building the system that runs when you're not there. If your employee takes a vacation, if you take a vacation, if you're training someone new, they're always going to fall back on your revenue system. It basically sets up your new baseline. So it's like the difference between having a $2.5 million quarter and being a $10 million company.
Hmm.
Like, do you want that 1 point success, or do you want to figure out how to get that repetitively and create that as your new baseline?
Hmm.
That's how I really view the difference there is like it's a one-time activity, it's an arm, or it's a whole system that's functioning on its own, and you can start to pick out little pieces and improve them. And this is where the real gains are. This is where scaling is, because if you can improve little bits by 1%, 2%, that adds up so much faster than a new LinkedIn ad campaign or a new feature launch. These 1% gains are much more stable, they're much more dependable, and they're going to be more attractive to your board, frankly, even though they seem more boring. They're not as exciting as a new campaign or a new website.
Yeah, two things hit me as you were talking. One is predictability
Mhm.
and one is efficiency,
Mhm.
right? So predictability, I've worked with companies that did not have a system, right? It was all around work harder, call more people.
Mhm.
And the symptom of that is whiplash bookings, right?
Mhm.
We're over the moon in a quarter and then we're in the ditch the next.
Exactly.
That's the
Yep.
whiplash, right?
Mhm.
Because there's no consistency of process.
Mhm.
And so when when you don't have that system where it's kind of a manufacturing line, right? When you don't have the system where you know that your production engine is moving properly all the way through,
Mhm.
then it's just opportunistic. And that's the whiplash bookings. And that's where really the board is, it's great to have to overachieve in a quarter. But if you're doing this whiplash thing, it's like overachieving is almost as bad as a miss because that means you do not have control over your growth function.
Mhm. Mhm. That's such an interesting point because one of my most recent clients actually came to me after an overachieving quarter. And
Mhm.
I remember thinking, there's something here. I've been trying to speak to CEOs more when they say that, because there's a difference between knowing why you got there, and understanding that it's projects that you took 3 months ago and they're projects that are ongoing, versus we overperformed, we're at 120%. I can't even explain why that is. Or to your
Mhm.
point, it was an artificial injection. Sometimes it's a price increase. Sometimes it can be things like that. But I had a client that actually very recently came to me thinking that same thing. They wanted more leads. That was their solution.
Mhm.
And we found out very quickly that even if they had doubled the leads that they got, they still would not have hit their revenue goals. And
Mhm.
that tells me something entirely, it's not the leads. The absolutely you might need more leads as a symptom, but what's causing the problem is probably further upstream. Maybe it's your ICP, maybe it's who you're marketing to, maybe it's the actual product. And when we found that doubling the leads would not have gotten them to the revenue goals, that's when the real work starts. That's when it's like, okay, now the diagnosis can begin. For this particular client, we found that the ICP was an issue, and also the PLG motion was an issue where they were getting so many um, lower qualified leads that couldn't quite go through the PLG motion. And the sales team didn't want to talk to them. They weren't incentivized to talk to someone at that level. So in their solution, we actually beefed up their PLG motion, so that more leads converted without ever speaking to a sales rep. We reduced the number of junk leads that the sales reps got. And then the few good leads that the sales reps were getting that they were totally ghosting, now they can actually give them attention. So they literally did get more leads, but it was not through any kind of pipeline injection. It was enhancing the PLG motion. So totally, totally different. Like the symptom is over here, but the problem was completely different. And it was just such a good example of a CEO coming to me thinking the usual, that they want more pipeline. Because that's
Mhm.
99% of
Yeah.
CEOs.
Yeah. And what you just described is you had a huge impact on sales productivity because they're
Also,
not they're not chasing stuff that is never going to close. And if you don't have the input of qualified uh, leads or qualified opportunities, and you have a bunch of extra sales capacity, guess what? They're going to chase whatever comes their way,
yep.
right? And that then your sales productivity and your sales efficiency goes way down.
And
And it's,
marketing
oh, we
starts
need to
hemorrhaging.
hire more reps, right?
Literally, this
um,
client was about to hire more reps. That's such a great,
mhm, mhm.
exactly. They wanted more
Yeah.
pipeline, more rep. They haven't done that now. And to your point too, like marketing and sales were kind of beefing at this point, and that's
Mhm.
really common too. These teams are
Yeah.
always, um,
It's
they
this
might have
pointing the
some,
finger thing, right? You're
exactly,
not giving us leads, you're not following up on our leads. Or
right. And now their goals are also better. Like, the marketing conversion rates from lead to deal, but lead to customer, especially through the roof. So marketing's happy too. And their leads, like you said, are more quality suddenly, even though they were the same leads. So just
yeah, and it's
totally
it is
common.
it's always that volume and conversion.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, you those are two very different levers.
Yeah.
Um, and you made me think. I was actually talking to one of our RevOps leaders and one of our customers, and they're looking at how they can uh, make up a gap that they're foreseeing. They have the IQ platform, right? So they're foreseeing a gap for the whole year performance.
Okay.
And
I
so
love
we
that in
look,
June.
what's that?
I love that in June. They've got time to do something about
Well,
it.
they're on a fiscal year that starts in April,
Oh,
so so it's not so they're still in Q1, they still have some
okay.
time. But they is it pipeline? Is it conversion? It actually depends on what revenue stream you're talking about.
Hmm.
And it was really fascinating because
Mm.
they have such an interesting portfolio of products that they have kind of their legacy, major product, cash cow, whatever you want to call it. And there was and that was very much in productivity. It wasn't in leads. They
Okay.
had they had a few products that were new to market or that they were launching That is all around pipeline, right?
Hmm.
So being able to look at your revenue streams and say, gee, what happens if I increase pipeline? What
Hmm.
happens if I bring in more of these zombie deals, or are they
Right,
zombie deals? Can I
right.
stick some of these? Can I shorten my sales cycle? Can I increase my win rate? And so, depending on what revenue stream we're talking about, the approach is different.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right that it's all about like kind of tinkering with all the different levers that we have. Because just like business owners have a ton of levers, I would say that RevOps is the same way. I'm surrounded by not only problems but solutions everywhere. On the other side of every single problem is a solution. And even then, like you said, you can solve a problem in a lot of different ways with a lot of different departments. And I love that you point out that, if I touch this one a little bit and then I do this and um, maybe it's referral flow or conversion or whatever it might be, or it's this specific script that needs fine tuning. But again, I love that like a 1% gain here and a 1% gain here and a 1% gain here. It sounds so small, but this is what moves a company from a $1 million revenue to 10 million and to 100. It's these like small systematic changes that once you make a 1% change once, it's going to keep compounding. But if you build a single program, a single launch event, a single feature launch, that kind of thing, it's only a moment in time. Frankly, it might last a week at best. So I'm definitely a proponent of these small changes that add up over time.
Yeah, and getting back to what you were talking about with a system,
Hmm.
if you haven't engineered a system,
Hmm.
that analysis is pretty much impossible. I mean, how do you help? Because a lot of companies do not have a system engineered that ties
Yeah,
all of these things together, where you
yeah.
can see what happens when a lever changes here, a lever changes there.
Hmm.
How do you overcome that, especially in these smaller companies, these high growth companies,
Yeah.
um, and that are the most resource constrained?
Yes. Yeah. I think this is a great question. And this is really what separates, I think, frankly, my process from a lot of others. Because I agree. First, not only do different clients have different levels of visibility, some might have a CRM, some have like a sheet still, depending on where they're at.
Hmm.
Um, some employees aren't even tracked yet in the CRM, they're just logging emails manually or something like that. So I do agree that the data is scattered at these companies, but it's there. So in addition to your usual like tech stack deep dive and your data deep dive, I start with interviews. I start with employee interviews with every go-to-market team member. So that's going to be everyone in product, marketing, customer success, and sales. Usually at the teams I'm working with, this is anywhere from like 10 to 15 people. So it's not a massive overhaul. I usually do it in 1 or 2 days, and I do that on purpose because what the CEO tells me is very rarely what the actual problems are, because you do have to be close to the problems to understand how they're affecting you. And what the CEO hears is almost never what's actually going on. One time I had a CEO tell me that they have a incredible sales to CS handoff process that a CS consultant had implemented from them. And it was immediately clear that CS wasn't using it, sales wasn't setting it up, marketing didn't even know that it existed. And the CEO, meanwhile, was like, "We've
Wah,
got this set up. Like it's good to go, and that's everything at a startup at this stage. So the big thing that I do is interviewing everyone same day or across 2 days, and it just becomes so obvious to me by the end of these interviews what the solid constraints are because they come up in every conversation. You think that they won't, but you and I know that these departments are linked. The problem that is experienced in marketing will be felt in CS, even if it is felt in a different way. Um,
mhm,
so I hear that problem over and over and over again in these interviews. I hear the KPI that's being defined incorrectly, or maybe not incorrectly, but differently by each employee. And I
mhm.
know what the implications are of, for example, revenue not being a goal for every team. When I ask marketing, what's your goal? and it's leads, or CS, what's your goal, and it's NPS scores. Everyone has a different goal. That's immediately something. So the interviews are really what I think point me in the right direction, because I agree, the data, if I'm trying to just find a bunch of data points, it's going to be tough even to get them in one document and to start assessing them. But
Hmm.
after the interviews, I know what data to go and look for. I know what to look for in the tech stack. And it becomes much easier. It's like it guides me, and then I go and find the data to confirm what I just found. Because your employees are the best source of information at companies here. And I think it's really important for CEOs that are trying to do this, maybe on their own, to try and not take ad hoc examples at face value. That's why I really like to do my interviews in one day with the whole team, because that's when I can get out of this one employee mentioned this one thing. I'm really more interested in what all 10 employees mentioned. That's where I'm
Hmm.
going to hone in and I'm going to dive into. So that's what I would recommend if CEOs want to replicate this with a low constraint or with a low budget. Take the time to block one full day for one-on-ones with every single team member. And when they go into a problem, like really try and not solve it in the moment. Like you just want to keep asking questions about the problem. You almost want to put your sales hat on and go into discovery mode, and just keep asking why, until the person doesn't know anymore, because that's where you're going to start adding value.
So as I'm hearing you speak, I'm thinking, the ability to interpret everything you're seeing requires an understanding of the whole system,
Hmm.
right? So I can imagine that you know what's what is actually meant when somebody articulates the problem. You probably can go uh, to the source and say, okay, you told me this was the problem, but because I understand the whole revenue system, the likely issue is over here. Do
Hmm.
you find that?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's such a great point, because once you've seen enough of the systems and enough of the trends, you do hear some of these patterns, and you know immediately, okay, you know what, CS mentioned that they're dealing with like reactionary churn. So I'm probably going to ask customers, or excuse me, I'm going to ask sales about their negotiation to close rate. And it's just because of like patterns that I have over the last 10 to 15 years, where I know that when CS is experiencing this problem, I bet sales is experiencing this problem. And I bet product isn't hearing about any of it. And absolutely, I would say that when, let's say, a CS rep says exactly that, they say, I'm getting a lot of churn emails directly in my inbox without any warning whatsoever. The question that I ask after that, it's not like a canned script that I have over here that I ask everyone. It is based off of that exact new information that they've given me. That's when I'll start asking, what kind of customers actually churn? How much data do you have on who is churning? I do have, I would say the biggest issue that I come across with CEOs is we need more pipeline, or our CS team is reactive rather than proactive. And
Mm-hmm.
CS constantly gets blamed because of that proximity bias. But again, we know that problem started way upstream. One customer that I had came to me with this, and we actually found that they did not have a churn problem for their highest revenue customers. 10% of their customers by volume gave them 80% of all of their company revenue. Those 10% of customers were solid. They had the highest LTV, they had the highest, the lowest CAC, because they came through partnerships. There was a lot of really interesting trends and patterns here. Again, instead of managing churn for the whole thing, we built like a concierge level service for that 10% of customers. The other 90%, we worked with marketing to build automated campaigns, in-app alerts, that sort of thing, reduce the time to value for onboarding. And suddenly, not only is churn by volume of customers lower, but churn by revenue was significantly lower. And that's what we really want, because again, the number of customers, you and I know, less important than the revenue. You always want to just keep digging and find the patterns. So it was just another example of where you're feeling the pain is just never where the actual problem started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just a few acronyms in case our listeners don't know them. So
Thank
LTV
you.
is lifetime value, CAC is customer acquisition cost. And when you were talking, I was like, yeah, the KPI of LTV to CAC is a great one. And it's
Yeah.
something that is so hard for companies to measure.
Yeah.
Um, but that is like this cross-functional
Yeah.
KPI. But as you were talking too, some of the KPIs that, when we talk about how all of these things touch each other,
Hmm.
when we have churn rate and product isn't involved,
Oh,
it's like you should know something's going to, like usage. What is
right.
operations needs to be involved,
Hmm.
right? What features are being used? How many times are they logging in? What percentage of the platform are they using? What is the time to first value of a new feature?
Hmm.
Product, I know, product is going to go, this is the coolest feature. I'm going to go do this and this and this and this and this. And it's like, okay, what is your goal?
Right.
What is the goal? Is it
Hmm.
retention? Is it new sales? You
Hmm.
know, those two things, depending on where the issues are, will be prioritized differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a real, I'm glad you brought up product because I would say that that problem between product not being in the revenue cycle, that's consistent. I see that in every single one of my clients at my range that I'm working with. They have not yet realized that product needs to be in the room for all of these things. I've been in the room when clients are launching features that they've been working on for 6 months, and there are no adoption goals. There are no revenue goals. And there's a bit of a there's a pushback when I mention that there should be these things. And I mean it to say because when you consider this before launching a feature, if the numbers don't work out, you cut the feature. It's
Hmm.
easy. But people feel like that's somehow worse than cutting the team after the feature is launched and it doesn't perform. But I would rather cut a feature than a team. And I don't think that these teams understand that if they make revenue their goal and if they answer to revenue, that's never going to happen to them. Uh,
Hmm.
not that not that employees frankly have any control about layoffs. But if the revenue makes sense, layoffs theoretically won't happen. And the team that is making revenue happen does not get laid off. We already know that. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm always using that phrase to get CEOs to get to be a little bit less precious about their product roadmap. Would they rather cut the feature or cut the team? You need to consider the revenue in advance. And it really is that harsh because people are making decisions with their resources as if it's not real money. They've got a team of 10 people together in a meeting for 45 minutes about this feature. That's like a $5,000 expense just to hold that meeting. And, no decisions come from it. So those are the kind of things that people really need to understand that even a simple meeting is revenue. And again, that's how RevOps looks at every single piece of the puzzle. So
Hmm.
that's why I'd rather just cut the feature half the time.
Yeah, and I think having the information to reveal why
Hmm.
the feature is being cut,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
Because um
Hmm.
one is sunk cost is so hard to come to terms with, right?
Yes.
We spend it, okay, but we're going to cut it anyway. And then you've got the product guys that are like, I am so invested in this feature. What do you mean you're cutting my feature, right? And but that's because the mindset isn't as you describe,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Because it should be obvious it should be obvious to everybody in the system why decisions are made,
Hmm.
right? And I will tell you, I'm sure you've seen this, the best way to disengage your workforce is to hand them down decisions and they don't know why. Then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm just going to do what I'm told then because, whatever, I don't know why we're doing what we're doing.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's such a great point because if you're right, if everyone is really one aligned on revenue and aligned on the customer needs, the product team will actually go to bat for the customer. If you're trying to cut a feature that they know the customer needs, they'll be able to prove it. They will have
Mhm.
data. They'll have customer conversations where, hey, you know what? Here's 25% of our customer base is actually affected by this exact problem. Here's our best customer asking for this feature. They're going to have all of that and they'll go to bat with like solid data when that feature should exist. So by no means am I saying let's cut and then not listen to the pushback, but the pushback needs to have real data behind it. And you're right, if everyone's going for what the customer wants or what revenue dictates, they're going to be the ones to recommend cutting it because they're going to realize, oh, you know what? I'm working 10, 12-hour days. And at the end of the day, I'm feeling like I didn't do much. That feeling comes from not doing the right work.
Mhm.
That's usually your first signal that's where like activity, you're doing a ton of activity, but you're not getting results. That's where that feeling comes from because you're doing the wrong thing.
Mhm. Mhm. So let's talk about what a well-functioning system looks like. What
Yes.
is it, what does that look like when everything is connected, when people
Mhm.
understand what the goals are? Share a bit about the attributes of that type
Yeah.
of system.
I think the two big things that stand out to me, and again, my range is 1 million to 10 million in ARR. The things that I really see are feedback loops, and more importantly, feedback loops that empower simultaneous rather than sequential action. So, a great example, when your customer gives, let's say, customer success during a quarterly business review, they let you know that, you know what, we actually considered a competitor this year because we had to do so for budgets or whatever. Like every year, I have to put forth 3 people. And I thought it was really interesting that this one competitor had X feature. We didn't go forward with it. We're renewing with you guys, yada, yada, yada. The conversation keeps going. A company, once they have these feedback loops built in, what will happen with that conversation is it will get completely spread out across the entire org and action will actually come from it. It will not die with that conversation. That's probably the number one signal that I see that feedback loops are really working in a company is that the recordings are actually being viewed and they're not being viewed by people within the team. They're being viewed by people outside of that team.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a customer success rep hears something like that, what they just heard was competitive intel. They just heard what their competitor does better than them, what would actually encourage a client to move away to another customer or to another competitor. And that's huge. So in a well-functioning system, a CS rep would essentially like auto flag that. There would be something, let's say it's Gong or Fathom or whatever it is, that would be automatically sent to product. I would want product teams to have to, it would be a actual task for them to listen to at least 2 to 3 customer snippets per week. I would also expect that snippet to go to marketing so that you can maybe actually market that feature if you do have it. Maybe you have that feature the customer wants and they don't know about it. Or you have it and it doesn't work well enough. So you want to get all over the place because even sales, you want to think about if sales knows that that's an objection, now they can plan for it. They're not going to be caught deer in the headlights with what to do about that. They'll say, you know what, we actually don't have that. And a lot of our customers have the same question. This is how they get around that. Or
Mm-hmm.
we do actually have that. It's a misunderstanding. This is how we do that. Um, so that simultaneous response to an input, that's what I think really separates um, a team that has this on lock versus doesn't. Because in a different team, that signal might get spread out, but it's going to take weeks. It'll show up maybe in like a month in marketing and sales and a pipeline review. And by that point, it's usually late. It's these signals, especially in today's day and age, they can be very time sensitive. If you hear about a competitor's event or new feature launch or something in the market that's happening that customers are interested in or that prospects are interested in, speed really, really matters nowadays. And that simultaneous action is, I think, what really separates companies from 1 to 10 million that do have a revenue motion versus the ones that don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, and how do you so I assume systematizing what you're talking about getting these feedback loops burnt in.
Mhm.
That requires, I would think, champion, a champion at an executive level. Are there things within the organization that you say, okay, what are some takeaways? What does a company have to do? What do they have to be open
Mm.
to make sure that a system can blossom?
That's a great question. I would say this is like my number one disqualifier too, after doing this now for
Interesting.
almost 2 years, is accountability. You have to be working with a CEO that is willing to drive accountability. I worked with a CEO recently that said he has three things that he lives and breathes by, and that's people, processes, and accountability. And he felt like he had the people and the process, and he didn't have the accountability, and so he had nothing. And
Hmm.
I completely agree, because I would say that all the work that is done by RevOps is frankly pointless if there is no accountability in place. Um,
Hmm.
Especially at this stage that we're at, because between 1 to 10 million, there is not the luxury of automating or systematizing everything. What you have to do is you actually have to look at where are you best at? What are you best at? And let's systematize that. Let's optimize that first. Whatever you're great at, that's where you want to like really run and launch. Um, and same thing with like automation. Where are your blockers to that thing that you're great at? Let's get that out of your path. But like I said, you're still going to have 95 fires around you that are burning that you're just keeping an eye on. Um, so it's really all about the clarity. But accountability, it doesn't matter if I give you the diagnosis and the plan and the tech stack tools and all these different loops or whatever, if no one listens to them, no one does anything with the information, if CRM hygiene still doesn't mean anything to anyone. And of course, there is a balance, right? You don't want to be, I never want ops to be getting in the way of revenue, right? So if my sales reps ever comes to me and says, you're asking for too much in the CRM, I'm not going to brush that off. I'm going to take that seriously because I don't want my sales rep bogged down by admin work. But there is a fine line between accountability and like holding someone's hand, and you cannot hold your team members' hands and get to your revenue goals. You really need to, as a CEO, be ready to drive accountability. What that means from a good perspective is great, but from a negative perspective, when people aren't willing to meet you there, you are going to have to actually implement some consequences, which is new for a lot of the CEOs that I'm working with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. You are amazing. And tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on LinkedIn, Katarina Lujic, and also our website, gtmlab.us. You can go ahead and book your free revenue audit on there. Every CEO walks away with something useful, whether or not we work together, because frankly, every conversation teaches me something, and I love what I'm doing here. So the more conversations I can have, the better. But definitely find me on LinkedIn or at my website.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I love the conversation. And
me too.
yeah, and we'll have you back when we can get some more war stories from
Oh,
you.
yes. Yeah, I'll keep
Um,
track. Thanks for having me.
Great. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.